Good evening, everybody.
Kabbalah Ta'af, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you. Okay, so we'll start the bit Yosef here. It says, we read the two yesterday. So we said, right, that the first opinion says you shouldn't start baking the matzot on Erev Pesach before midday. So regarding that, says bit Yosef, midikatab deitkash bepesach, right? Why is that? Because it says in the Gemara, Psachim Kuf Chaf Amud Bet, that it's juxtaposed to the Pesach sacrifice. So therefore, we give it the same rules. Mashma de matzah, so implies that when it comes to matzah, shehu atid letzet ba yedei chobato, that he's going to fulfill his obligation with that matzah. Maire, we're dealing with that matzah. The ilu shar matzah, because if you're talking about the rest of the matzah, Shadam Ochel bePesach, that a person eats on Passover, lo itkash lePesach. It wasn't really juxtaposed to Pesach. Okay. וכן משמע נמי ממה שכתב אך לכתחילה. That's also, he says, implied that it says the word ach לכתחילה, which יש להיזהר משום דחביבה מצווה בשעתה. So, right, that a person should do the mitzvah at the right time, and that's like the more superior way of doing the mitzvot, right? Everything at the right time, at the right juncture. So that's why we want to make sure we do it at the right time. Also here, what does that mean? That we should make the matzot at the right time. Okay, so that's good. Also comes out from the Avi Azri. Hevi Tosefta, that he bought the Tosefta. Yotzein b'matzah yeshena. That it says there you can fulfill your obligation with old matzah. Umash katav ve'asur rabotenu. Now what she wrote that the rabbis forbade, v'chen ma shekatav, and also what he wrote, Yerushalmi oser, that the Yerushalmi is also forbids this. Haynu lomar she'asur letzot behem yedei chovat matzah. That means that you can't fulfill your obligation for matzah if you don't do it this way. Aval leochlam shelo l'shem mitzvah. But if you're doing it just not for the sake of mitzvah, en bahem tzad chashash yisur klal. So then there's no prohibition, right? There's nothing there. There's nothing wrong with it. Okay. Goes on, אבל קשה ממה שכתב בשעת הדחק, שלא ימצאו לאפות ראוי לסמוך על התוספתא. But it says, difficult what he says there, that in a pressing situation, that you're not going to find, right, what to bake. Then you can rely on the Tosefta, ulatir mikom makom, to allow it in any case. Yasu shalosh matzot belel Pesach. So he says, on Eve of Passover, right, the custom is to make 3 matzot, because that's the amount that you need for the mitzvah. to put on the the table of the seder. You need three matzot. So that's what you should make, right, on Erev Pesach. After midday. That's what you want to do. You want to make that batch, your three, right? Your three matzot. You want to do it that at that time. Okay. Maybe to the matzah mitzvah, dafka mayre. So it says if it's true that it's only talking about the matzah of mitzvah, ad hashta hare kvar katav derawi lismoch al tosefta. It says that you can rely on the tosefta. Ulatir ve'echi, and to allow to use that. Ve'echi hadar be, and then how does he retract? Ve'amar mikol makom yasu shalosh matzot belel Pesach. And then it says, right, that you can make three matzot, which is only for the mitzvah. So it's therefore there is to say the bechol matzah aire, that's talking about every matzah. Ben shehi shel mitzvah, whether it's mitzvah matzah, ben she'ena shel mitzvah or not. Ve'achi ka'amar en mitaskin ba b'shum matzah klal. So what is he trying to say? We shouldn't make any matzot at that time, right? In other words, at the wrong time. Ad achar shesh shaot, until after the 6th hour. Ubeshat chag shelo imatzu leafot. So he says, but in a pressing situation where we can't find, right, something to bake. Belel Motzi Shabbat, on the night of Motzi Shabbat, which is Saturday night. Rawi lismoch ala tosefta. So then you can rely on the tosefta and do it, right, like that. Ulatir litasek bepat me'erev Shabbat, and to do the bread on erev Shabbat, which is Friday. So in other words, you're not doing it at that time, that we have right. You're not doing it at that time where we talked about after midday on the eve of Passover. You're doing it much earlier. But if there's no choice, you can do that. Okay. So good. Yeah. Okay. I was just getting distracted by this video, whatever. I don't know, something. Michael was showing us some kind of a strange video there. What is that, Michael? What are you showing us there? I shut it down. It was distracting me. I don't know. I don't know what it is. Anyway, very strange. So, so it says, goes on. So it says, לסמוך על התוספתא ולהתיר ולהפסק בפת בערב שבת והיינו דווקא במצב שאינה לשם מצווה. That's only if it's not for the מצווה. אבל מכל מקום אותה לשם מצווה יעשה בליל פסח. But when you're talking about the mitzvah stuff, right? That's already try to do it on the eve of Passover, right? Okay. Mishum chaviba mitzvah, right? Why is that? Because it's good to do the mitzvah at the right time. וכן נראה מדברי רב מתתיה שכתב, so it says it also seems from this rabbi, ולמה אין מבארין הכל ויאפו מצה ויאכלו בשבת? So it says, why don't, it says, right, why don't we just burn everything and do the matzah? I'm sorry, why don't we get rid of the chametz, right? Yeah, burn the chametz and then to bake the matzah and eat it on Shabbat. Hilkach al tofu matzah ela. So he says, therefore, don't bake the matzah b'motzi Shabbat, right on after Shabbat. Mashma deshum matzah eno pin me'erev Shabbat. So there, right, it implies that you shouldn't do any matzah on the eve of Shabbat on Friday. Afilu ena shel mitzvah. But even if it's not mitzvah. ונראה לפרש דלא מיירא אלא במצה של מצווה. So it seems like that he says, right, that he's only talking about the matzah mitzvah. kol hanach lishne, like the language implies there. Umash katav b'shat adchak shelo yimatzu le'efot rawi lismoch al atosefta. So is that what she wrote? That in the pressing situation, that you can't, right? You can't find something to bake there. Rawi lismoch al atosefta. Then we can rely on the tosefta. Okay, you can't do it on the eve of Passover. But he says you should do, right, the three matzot on the eve of Passover, right? At least that much, the minimum, right, for the seder. It means to say like this, that in a pressing situation, min adin rawi lismoch ala tosefta ulatir. It's proper to rely on the Tosefta and to allow this. But it says in any case, that it's proper to do it at the right time. It's better, more right opportune time. So therefore, you should make at least three matzot at that time, right? On the eve of Passover. Klomar, mishum de mitzvah min ha-mubchar yaseh belel Pesach. Because this is like the best way to do the mitzvah. So we already spoke about this a little bit, right? According to Kabbalah, also it's like this, that it's the best time to do the matzot for the seder. V'chen mash katav Rab Matitya Hilkach says also that which this rabbi wrote, al tofu matzah ela b'motzi Shabbat, that you should only make the matzot on Motzi Shabbat.
Going home. I'll walk you home if you want. Yeah. They're going to close. Well, they close it. And
another distraction. Okay, we're getting all kinds of distractions today. Okay, so let's go on. So it says, right, that יעשו שלוש מצות בליל פסח, כלומר משום מצווה מן המאוחר, יעשה בליל פסח, וכן מה שכתב רב מתתיה, ילקח אל תאפו מצה אלא במוצאי שבת, משום מצה דמצווה הוא דקאמר, he's talking about the מצה מצווה, right? Don't do it except on the eve of Passover. אחי, אבל מצה שאינה יוצא בידי חובת מצה, but if you're just making regular מצה, right, your garden variety מצה, not for the mitzvah of the seder, so then you can bake it anytime you want, right? Doesn't matter what you want to do. Do it anytime you like, right? Okay. By the way, the factories, the matzah factories, they start baking, for Passover like 2 months before or 3 months before. So, if you buy matzah off the shelf, right, it's very likely that it was baked about 2 months ago. From the time that you eat it, right? Something like that, right? It's quite likely, yeah. So, nowadays, right, things are a little bit different. Everything is industrialized, right? Okay, so that's the way it is. But if you want to be, right, one of those tzaddikim, like they're in Jerusalem and in Eretz Israel, that they make the matzah on Erev Pesach. So, right, be my guest and do it, right? Wait till midday. And then, bring your kosher flour, right? And get ready and knead your dough and put it in there and make those three matzot, right? For the seder. So you can have a nice fresh matzah and to do it at the best time, which is, as we said, right? That's the best time to do it. Okay. All right. Hopefully one day we'll be able to do that mitzvah, of baking the matzot Erev Pesach after midday. Wow. Okay, can you imagine if we do that? All right, so that's the idea, right? That's what we're talking about here. Good. דאף אגב דמצה דאיתקש לפסח היינו אותה שיוצא בה ידי חובתו שמצא אחד הוא. So I skipped something. I'm going to go back here, right? ואפשר דאכול בכל מצה מיירא. It could be that it's talking about every matzah, right? That you should do it at that time. אפילו אותה שאינה דצאת ידבה ידי חובה. Even that stuff that you're not using for your obligation, אין מתחילים להתעסק בה, you should only do it, right? Maybe, perhaps, that's what he means. Right? עד אחר השש שעות, until the sixth hour, right? In other words, after midday. דאף אגב דמצה דאיתקש לפסח היינו אותה שיוצא בה ידי חובתו. So he says, right, that even though that the matzah that was juxtaposed to the Korban Pesach, it's talking about the mitzvah stuff, right? Nevertheless, right, but it's all one thing, right? It's all one batch. Shem matzah echadu, right? It's all called matzah. ולפי זה, התהי הדקאמר, בכל מקום יעשה שלוש מצות בליל פסח. So he says, that which it says, right, you should do the three matzot on the Pesach, kipshato, right, it's talking about the simple meaning, v'chen yireh mimash katav. That's what it seems when it says, Amordechi, Beperk Kama de Psachim, first Perk of Psachim. Nishal Rabbeinu Shimshon, right, Mishantz. This rabbi was asked, Keshachal Pesach liot be'echad b'Shabbat. If Passover falls on, right, on Sunday, Saturday night, Sunday, im asur le'afot matzot miyom hashishi. Is it forbidden, right, to bake the matzot on Friday in order to, avoid these issues? Ve'ashiv de'asur mishum de'itkash le'Pesach. So he says, no, forbidden. Why? Because it's juxtaposed to Korban Pesach. Just like that you do in the sixth hour, after the sixth hour, this also same thing. Like we said over there in this Gemara, Kuf Chaf Amud Bet, Achal Matzah le'achar chatzot lo yatsa. Oh, look what he says, right? That if he ate the matzah after the midnight, I guess he's talking about it, not midday. He's talking about midnight. If he ate the matzah after midnight, he didn't fulfill the obligation. Didkash to Pesach, because it's also juxtaposed to Pesach, right? Regarding when you eat it. So what does that mean? Just like the Pesach, you have to eat the Korban Pesach. You have to eat it before midnight. So the matzot as well, same thing. And that's why, by the way, I'll tell you a secret, whatever. There are some, like very good families that have a bad habit when it comes to Passover, the night of Passover. You know what they do, right? They like to do divrei Torah, lots of, divrei Torah and all kinds of, right, the words of wisdom about the Exodus and all that, right? The problem is they go a little bit too long, and what happens is that, they don't eat the matzah or even the other things, the other mitzvot that we're doing, the maror and everything else, right? The afikoman, all these things. They don't eat it on time, they eat it after midnight, which is not good, because as we said here, right, that it's all juxtaposed to Pesach. So therefore, just like Pesach has to be before midnight, also these mitzvot should be also before midnight, so this is the thing, so so therefore, right, a wise person, what does he do? We do divrei Torah, Baruch Hashem, on the table. We expand, we expound, right? We, right, extrapolate, whatever you want to call it, right? All these things, we analyze, and we bring all kinds of sources and this and that. Okay, very good. It's all good. But, right, at the same time, make sure, right, that you pace yourself as well. So what does that mean, right? Make sure that you do all the mitzvot before midnight, including, right, the matzah and the maror, right, and the afikoman and all these things, right? We want to make sure everything is done before midnight. Basically, right, bottom line, you should be finished with everything before midnight, the whole thing, right? And then if you want to continue and do more divrei Torah afterwards, be my guest, right? If you're still alert, right, after the 4 cups of wine, and you're still awake and everything, so go for it, and right, continue, to speak divrei Torah, just like Rabbi Akiva and his friends, right, who stayed up all night until the morning, expounding the right, the Haggadah, right, and all that stuff. So that's the way it is, So if you want to do it that way, fine, but you got to pace yourself as well, make sure everything is on time, not like these families or get a little bit too involved, with Divrei Torah, and it becomes like some kind of a, yeshiva night. I mean, after all, you have to, you're doing also mitzvot there. You got to make sure you do the mitzvot on time. That's the thing. So, yeah, I remember, one time when I was in my younger days, I was invited over to a certain family, and I won't mention the name or whatever, but this is what they did, and like we didn't finish the Haggadah until it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, my God, this is ridiculous, I mean, we were supposed to finish like 3 hours ago, you know? So, they get a little bit too involved with the Divrei Torah and they forget, there's also mitzvot to do. This is the problem, and I've seen this and got me very frustrated when I saw this, because I felt like I was losing my portion in the right in my Seder night, whatever, Okay. I think I've said enough about that. So let's go on. Let's go on. Right. וגם בתשובה רב יהודה הגאון כתב לאיסור, right? So לאסור, right? So it says that also in the tshuva of this rabbi, it says, right, to forbid. גם ראיתי תשובת רבנו תם שאסר, also רבנו תם, שמא יאמר פסח הוא right, משבת שעבר ויש מתירים. So it says, right, that these rabbis were forbade. So what does it mean they forbade? They forbade to make those matzot, right, on Erev Shabbat, right? Like we said, right? We asked if it's allowed to do that or not. Okay. Some are also allowed to do this, right? They allow you to do. Midatanya mitosefta, like it says in Tosefta, yotzim b'matzah yeshana. You can use also, right, old matzah. What does it mean, old matzah? It was baked like a couple of days ago, right? It's old, It's right, but still, right? The Gemara says you can use it. Tosefta, whatever. Uvivad shenaset l'shem mid Pesach, as long as it's made for Pesach. Good. Miu yesh lidchot, right? But it says, however, you can, also push it out. You can argue with this and say, Data maire b'matzah shenaset kilchata. There we're talking about matzah which was made properly. Achar shesh umechza, right? After 6 hour. L'shem matzah, for the sake of matzah. Klomar b'shana she'avra, right? It was made last year. Oh, okay, we're talking about really old, right? We're talking about the year before. The Tanya the Tosefta. That which it teaches in Tosefta. Arba asar shechal liot b'Shabbat, ofer lo matzah merev Shabbat. So it says, right, that the 14th that falls on Shabbat, he makes the matzah, right? Erev Shabbat, you make it on Friday, as we said, right? Nireh le'atir. So it seems like he's allowing, right, this to do this. Ve'od raya le'atir midetnan. So there's also another source in the Mishnah, right, that allows this. It says chalot todah kikei nazir asan limkor b'shuk yotze behen. So it says if you made, right, chalot from todah, which is like, sacrifices, or rekikei nazir also, right, all kinds of breads which are sacrifice. So if you made these, right, and he made them to sell in the market, so it says you can fulfill your obligation for matzah. Even though you didn't make it right on Erev Pesach, but still you can fulfill your obligation. There's also another source to allow this, right, to be lenient. As it says in Yerushalmi Perek Kol Sha'ah, Matzah Yeshana Plukta de Bet Shammai uBet Hillel. So it says there, right, that regarding old matzah, right, as we said, which is from last year, right, it's a machloket between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel. Uba Maaseh Lifnei Mori Arav Yechiel. So it says Paris, right? So it says this rabbi from Paris, Rabbi Yechiel, right, had a real case like this, where he was probably asked if they could use old matzah from last year. Veitir, and he says he allowed it, right? He allowed it. Okay, good. Viksha de matzah lePesach lo havia ela le'inyan achila. So he asked that the matzah for Passover is only for eating, not for baking. אמנם שלוש מצות של מצווה יש להפות בליל פסח. But he says, nevertheless, right, those three matzot that we're talking about, right, for the seder, says that you really should make on, the eve of Passover, right, like we said. B'motzei Shabbat, right, which is, on this particular case, we're talking about, right, the Saturday night, or, whatever, right, or Sunday. Yeah, Saturday night. Yeah, we're talking about Saturday night. Because Sunday, it's already too late. How's it going to help you on Sunday? You need it for the night. Okay, mishum dechaviva mitzvah meshata, because as we said, right, when you do things at the proper time, this is the best way of doing the mitzvah, right? That's the whole thing. Okay, good. So then he goes on. כתב אמנם שלוש מצות של מצווה משמע ודאי דעד השתא אפילו בשאינן של מצווה מהרי. So he says that which he said, right, that regarding the three matzot of the mitzvah, that means that before this, right, he was talking about all of them. So meaning what? That he forbade all of them to make them. He permitted to make all of them, right, on Friday. Okay, so we see, right, that there's two different opinions here, basically. That some allow you to do it right on Friday in case like this, and some do not. So we'll see what the halacha is, right? I'm pretty sure that the halacha is lenient regarding this because we don't, right? Most of us, 99% of us don't make matzot on Erev Pesach, and we're all, right, Baruch Hashem, doing the mitzvot. So it must be that we have what to rely on, right? It can't be that we're breaking the halacha. It can't be that we're transgressing against the Shulchan Aruch, God forbid. Okay, so let's go on. וכל זה מה שכתב רבנו אך לכתחילה להיזהר משום לחביב המצווה בשעתה. כל מה שכתב ואבי עזרי הביא התווספת ויוצאת במצווה שנה, צריך לומר דמיילה לפי מנהג אשכנז. So he says it must be that the Torah here is talking about the minhag of Ashkenaz, right, which is Germany, right? So the custom of Germany, שעושים המצוות של מצווה של מצווה גדולה שיספיקו לסעודת ימים ראשונים, ואין עושים מצות, I'll read this one more time, שעושים המצות של מצווה גדולות שיספיקו לסעודת ימים ראשונים, right? So it says over there in Germany they were making like big matzot. So why is that? Because they wanted to like last for the first days of Passover, the first 2 days, right? The whole 2 days. Then אין עושים מצות אחרות לאותם ימים. So they don't make any more matzot after that batch, right? That's like the only batch they make for the first 2 days. תהשת מצות דאכילה דידהו. So he says, now, right, these are matzot of eating. Meaning what? They're not for the mitzvah, right? There's also, just for eating. Didhu hayu shel mitzvah, right? So but what they were eating, was also for the mitzvah because they were making only one batch. So it was like all purpose, for the mitzvah and also not for the mitzvah. Okay. Enami leminhag didan the matzot shel mitzvah lechud. Matzot da'achila lechud says, or also alternatively you can say, right, that we're talking about our custom, which is, I guess, the Sfardim, right, the Spanish guys. So he says, by us, right, the way we do it is, we make 2 batches, right, one regular and one mitzvah, right? So he says, matzot shenan lemitzvah talu b'matzot shel mitzvah. So he says they made one dependent on the other. Kemo shkatavti teshem matzah echad hu, because it's like matzah is one. In other words, it's all one category. V'hilkach leman de'amar de matzah shel mitzvah yesh leizaher. So he says, therefore, according to the one who says, right, that the mitzvah, you got to be careful. Mishum chaviv mitzvah b'shata, because doing it at the right time. Gam b'matzah she'ena mitzvah, that also matzah which is not mitzvah, yesh lizayah, should also be careful if you can. Ulavi azri demaite tosefta, according to this rabbi, right, that brings a tosefta yotziim b'matzah yeshena, that you can follow your obligation with old matzah, right, which is from last year. Kivan de matzah shel mitzvah share leafot kodem pesach. Since the matzah mitzvah you're allowed to bake before Passover, kol sheken matzah she'ena shel mitzvah, all the more so which is not mitzvah, right? So according to this opinion, it comes out to be different altogether. very lenient, right? The most lenient opinion, which I know has a Gemara that we're relying on there. There's a Talmud there. Okay, so anyway, right? Goes on. Erev Pesach shechal liot b'Shabbat. What about, as we said, right? Erev Pesach that falls on Shabbat. So that means we can't, obviously we can't bake on Shabbat. So we got to do it either, right, Saturday night, or we got to do it on Friday, right? So, right, that's what we're talking about. Hilkach al tofu matzah ela b'motzi Shabbat. So it says, therefore, right, do the matzah only on Motzi Shabbat, after Shabbat, mipnei marit ayin, because it's otherwise looks suspicious. So he says, what does that mean, suspicious? What's the suspicion? So he says, if somebody sees you, right, that you're making the matzot on Friday, right, he's going to think you're eating that stuff on Shabbat. Right? And Shabbat is not really, it's not really Passover yet, right? So he says, therefore, you'll come to eat on Shabbat the matzot, and that's not good. Why? Because you're cheapening the mitzvah like that. It says, right, you're disgracing the mitzvah. How is it disgracing mitzvah? Because you're eating the matzot one day before, right, the holiday, and that's like, you're taking away the newness, right, the chidush, right, the novelty of it by eating the day before. That's why, by the way, it says in Shulchan Aruch, right, that you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to have matzah on the eve of Passover, right? You can't eat it because of this reason. Okay, there's a rule like this. We'll get to that. So anyway, right, good. Right? So why is that? Because, first he ate like a ton of it, right, on Shabbat, and then all of a sudden he blesses on it the next day, right, as if like it's something new. What's a novelty for you, right? You already had it on Shabbat, so defeats the purpose. That's what he's trying to say. Okay, good. That's what it says. It says, right, it's written, Sheim atem ofim me'erev Shabbat yacharim mizalzalim b'mitzvah. That's what he meant to say, right, that you're disgracing the mitzvah like that by baking it on Friday. Mordechai katav b'perek kama de Pesachim, says the Mordechai, first perek of Pesachim, dugmat teshuvah zo derech matitya b'shem Rav Yehuda Gaon, right? Says he writes it in the name of this rabbi, the same thing, the same content. Right? This is the language. Pesach shechal liot be'echad b'Shabbat. If Pesach falls on Sunday, al tofu matzot miyom hashishi. So don't, right, again, same thing, right? Don't bake the matzot on Friday. Mipnei mait ayin. Why? Because it looks suspicious. And even though you're allowed to, right, bake on Erev Shabbat, what's the problem? But it says it seems like you're making on Erev Shabbat for Yom Tov. And then, right, they baked it on Motzi Shabbat, bizmana, at the right time. That's what you should do. But tochal bizmana, eat it on the right time. Okay, so so it seems to me that what he's saying, right, that he's preparing from Shabbat to Yom Tov. That means to say Motzi Shabbat, that a person who sees, right, on Saturday night, matzah afuya, baked matzah, atel memar is going to come to say shenefet b'Shabbat, that it was made on Shabbat. These guys are baking matzah on Shabbat, right? And that says, according to this, that which it says, right, because of the suspicion, it's because of this suspicion that we just mentioned. That it shouldn't come to say, right, that it was baked on Shabbat in matzot. Even though it was impossible, it was possible, right? It says to explain that this rabbi meant this was his intention. That he said about suspicion. But it says in any case, right, from his language, it seems like he only was intending to, right, to talk about what we explained before. and not exactly this issue here. Okay, good. Let's go on. So he says, and then he says, right, that this rabbi also wrote, וכיוצא בזה הישיבה רבי יהודה הכהן, אשר שאלו מהו לאפות מצות שצריכות בליל שני מערב יום טוב, right? So yeah, so he was also asked regarding, right, the what? What's the din about making matzot that you need on the second night, right? The Passover, on the eve of Yom Tov. So what's the question? כלומר, למדנו מדבריו שחביב המצווה בשעתה. So we learn from here also, right, from his words, that the proper time is the best way to do it, right? At the proper time. Hachi Shapir, Mishum Hachi, because of this, Shapir Dame Lefot Matzot Belel Yom Tov Atzmo. So he says, therefore, it's no problem, right, to make the matzot on the eve of Yom Tov itself. Ve'af agav delo naktinan kerab Yehuda. Not the eve, but the night of Yom Tov, right? That's what he's saying. The night of Yom Tov. And even though we don't pass like Rabbi Yehuda Kohen, we don't regarding his opinion here. And that which share lo kol haolam ofin me'erev Yom Tov, because not everybody bakes on erev Yom Tov matzot tatzrichot, the matzot that are needed for the second night. Shani hatam sheofim otam achar zman akravat korban. So he says there it's different. Why? Because we bake them after the time of the korban, of the korban Pesach. אבל לאסור קודם זמן הקרבת קורבן פסח, but he says to forbid before the time of קורבן פסח, נקטינן כבטא, we pass like him, דלא יקדים לאפותן מערב שבת, that he shouldn't do it too early, right, on Friday. ורב היי כתב מנהג אבותינו לבאר חמץ מבערב פסח, so he says, this rabbi writes, Rav Hai, that he says, our forefathers, he says we had a custom, right, which is that when Shabbat falls on the eve of Passover, he says we used to eradicate the chametz, right, destroy the chametz on erev Shabbat, on Friday, lefot matzah, right, and then to bake the matzah. The gader gadru kadmonenu, right. So that was like the fence that they made, right, to make it like this, that they should get rid of the chametz before Shabbat. A lot of people, by the way, have this custom also nowadays, that when Shabbat falls on the eve of Passover, that Shabbat, even though it's not Passover yet, they don't eat chametz because they're just making things like more coherent, right? Because otherwise, it's like sometimes you can have an accident, right, and not do things properly. You're gonna have leftover chametz, right, on Shabbat, and all of a sudden, right, you're coming into Pesach. So you got to get rid of all the chametz, right, in the morning. So it's a little bit tricky, to do all that. So therefore, a lot of people opt, even nowadays, by the way, they opt to just have that Shabbat, only, not leavened products. They don't eat leavened products. They get rid of all the chametz before, on Friday. But the guys who have guts, the guys who have courage, right, the courageous people, like me, right, I'm very courageous when it comes to this. So what we do, the courageous guys, is that when Shabbat falls on Erev Pesach, what we do is we come home from shul, we pray early, nets, very early. We come home, and before the fourth hour, we try to eat a nice chametz meal. And then right after we finish our meal, very early, usually in America, right, people eat around 11, 12, 1, their Shabbat meal, their for the day. But this time that you got to be like the Israelis, eat very early, right? So that means, you got to eat you got to finish prayers at like around 8 o'clock, and then eat, right? And by 10 o'clock, you got to have everything already done, and then you have another hour to destroy the chametz, right? So what do you do? How do you destroy the chametz on Shabbat? You flush it down the toilet, right? Like a good modern person. That's what we do, right? Because we can't burn it on Shabbat, right? So the only way to get rid of it is to flush it in the toilet. There's also other ways, but this is the most right. This is the most common way of doing it. It's very simple, very easy. Just got to make sure, right, that you crumble it up because otherwise it will get, make a clog in your toilet, right? You'll have to right push it down somehow. Right? Make sure you don't clog up your toilet. So your chametz has to be first, like broken up into small pieces, and then you can flush it down, right? Excuse my right language, right? Excuse my candor. That's what we do, right? But as we said, right over here, that the Torah brings, the other custom, which is practiced by many people, by the way, nowadays, which is that they just get rid of all the chametz right before Shabbat, and they have just non-leavened products on Shabbat. How do you do that? Right? We'll discuss that, Bezat Hashem, another time. Right? We'll get into that. It's a whole topic by itself. Okay, so Bezat Hashem, I guess we'll stop here. We'll continue next time, Bezat Hashem. I don't think we can finish the chapter today. It's a little bit longer. Need like another half hour probably, whatever. So Bezat Hashem, we'll get into it, right? We'll dig into it next week, right? We'll probably finish a B'li Neder on Sunday, and then we'll continue from there to the next chapter, whatever it is, right? Well, we don't really have much left, for the making of matzot, so probably another 2 weeks or whatever. We can probably knock it off, whatever. We'll see what happens. We'll see how it goes. Bezat Hashem. So yeah, tonight is Purim Katan, so there's a little bit of a simcha going on tonight. So try to be in a good mood, right? Don't get depressed tonight, right? It's Purim Katan, right? But you don't have to break up the cocktails either, right? We're not drinking tonight, so yeah. Save the wine for Shabbat. You don't have to open it now. Okay, Bezat Hashem. We'll see you next week. Shabbat Shalom. Chazak Baruch. Laila Tov.
Kavod Harav. Thank you so much. Shabbat
All
Shalom.
the best. God bless. God bless.